Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Zimfer. I'm an assistant professor of practice with the School of Construction Management Technology at Purdue University. Joining me today is Scott Wentz, the president of True Homes out of Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as being the founder of Builders Bridge. And we'll get into what all that means here shortly. Also on the call today is Chad Todd. He is outside sales for Von Tobel Lumber. They are 100% employee-owned full-service lumber company here in the state of Indiana. They have 4 locations and even service outside the state lines of Indiana. So, gentlemen, thanks for jumping on the call today. I appreciate your time. We're here to kind of talk about the industry, where we are, where we're going, not so much about where we've been, but more about the future. And we'd like to share this with students as well as anybody who views the videos and hopefully provide a little bit of education along the way. So thanks for being here.
Great. Thanks for having us.
So let's get right into the first question. Scott, I'll start with you. How has 2021 played out for True Homes?
Oh, well, thanks, Mark. We are having a record year. It is the market is in a spot. This is my 32nd year in the home building industry this year, so I've seen quite a bit through all those 32 years. And I would say as in terms of sales and opportunities, it's as good as it's been in 32 years.
Wow.
And there's some underlying structural reasons behind that. But to answer your question directly, we're having a record year. We're staged to have another record year next year. And most of that is being driven by the fact that there's a structural undersupply of lots and land, which means there's a structural undersupply of homes being built. And so whenever you have more people buying homes than there are homes available, I didn't go to business school, but that means it's a good thing on the sales front. And so we're having record years in terms of opportunity and margins. And we've been fortunate enough and blessed to be able to have the land in front of us to provide those opportunities. So on that front, it's a great year. We'll have record sales and starts and closings. And again, along with the same theme of the undersupply, there is a supply chain crisis. And so while you can sell them and get great prices for it and opportunity, it's as difficult as it's been to get them built. And
right.
So we've seen, supply chain issues that I've not seen in my 32 years. And they're all kind of happening at once. But, if you have the right relationships, and I'm sure Chad can attest, there's still product out there that you can get. It's just a matter of the partnerships you have to get it. So in that regard too.
Absolutely. What, Scott, can you speak quickly on the undersupply of land? Is that regulation?
Sure.
Is it, people step back on developing coming out of 2008? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the beginning of it. In 2008, fundamentally, what happened was, you had the mortgage crisis that began the whole thing. Prior to that, and the run up to that, land was being overdeveloped by record amounts, because everyone was able to get a mortgage. They're the investors and the capital that was out there. And so all these developers and a lot of builders and the banks were fully behind them, supporting all of these lots, if you will, being developed, land, and in great abundant supply. So to give you a benchmark, 6 months of supply is what we would call equilibrium. And what that means is 6 months of homes that are new or used on the market, whatever price band. If you have 6 months, and that's a healthy market, that's what we would call equilibrium. Well, after 2008, in some price bands here in Charlotte anyway, there were 3 years of supply. So you can imagine that it was literally, 5-6 times as much as you would need, and it was that in pretty much all price bands in most markets. and you had some markets that were worse than others, but Charlotte really got hit hard, and so the market went down 85%. Well, because there was such an oversupply, land and development basically stopped. And it was that way nationally until everyone could figure out what to do with all of these assets that were on the ground. And it took us as an industry literally 5 years to burn down through that. And so for our company, we started in 2007. And in 2008, the Great Recession hit. And so we were able to go and take advantage of that, honestly, and get some of those lots and be able to live on those for the next 5 years. But development really didn't start again until about 2013, 2014. And then it was not nearly at the pace that it was previous. Well, that created a big gap. And that gap is what we see today as the structural issue, where land, there's X number of homes that need to be built to meet the demand of in-migration in any market every year. And in most markets in the United States, most major markets anyway, that land is way behind structurally. And what I mean by structurally is that we couldn't fix it tomorrow. Even if we had all the capital in the world, you can't go out and fix it because you can't get it through the municipalities. You can't get the people to go and put the infrastructure in quick enough for the demand. And so right now in every market we're in, and we're in 5 different markets in the Carolinas, North and South, we'll do about 2,200 homes this year. In every market we're in, there's less than 1 month supply. And so it should be 6, and there's less than 1.
Right.
And so that is the structural issue. And that's what's different about the industry today. And you might think, okay, well, that's a crisis. It's not a crisis if you have land. It's a crisis if you don't, because it's not necessarily hard to find it, but it's hard to get it out to market. And so, but it does create a great opportunity on the building side. It creates great opportunities on the supply side because demand is very high. So immigration is going to continue in markets like Charlotte, knock on wood, and jobs are growing. And as jobs grow, homes are needed. And so that's a great thing for the industry. And land will eventually, catch up. But right now it looks like it's 5 to 7 years before it can get back to a healthy, even close to the 6 months of supply.
Sure. Well, thanks for discussing that aspect. Chad, from your side, you guys supply everything from stick lumber and floor systems, trusses, windows, doors, trim, cabinets, you name it. What was 2021 like for Von Tobel?
So when we got through 2020, we kind of came in sideways and on fire and thought, wow, we never going to see that again. And that was the worst thing ever. And we kind of stepped back at the end and said 2020 was terrible, but 2021 was a huge roller coaster. We went through everything of, the market just rising to levels that, when we seen 1,000, we thought, oh my gosh. And we speak to things that we've never seen in 30 years. That was a benchmark and then we realized as we just continued way past that it was a roller coaster. And then to see the fall of the market. So again, just like Scott said, it's things that you have never seen in the years that you've been in. But when you stop and look at it, again, we're very thankful, at least in Indiana, that we've been deemed essential. And, and I feel like our local and state organizations fought really hard for the state of Indiana to keep that going. And so for us, although it was a huge roller coaster, we've been more than happy to take the ride. It's just to see, there's definitely supply chain challenges that we can't completely understand. We can't get caulk, not because they can't produce the raw material, because they can't produce the containers to put the caulk in. So every day you deal with those challenges. And so, again, it's just been a fun ride, but it's been a roller coaster.
Sure. Yeah, I think with, all of us have been in the industry for decades. So you start to get comfortable, right? And think, okay, I kind of know how the rhythm of the industry works and the rhythm of a job site. And I know personally I've kind of had to relearn, it seems like, over the last 2 years, because long lead times, smaller crews that are out on site, where you may have had a 7 or 8 person crew. Now you have a 2 or 3 person crew or 4 person crew. And of course, the supply chain has been just off the charts, and it's affected every part, almost every product that goes into the house. Chad, I just want to mention, when you say 1,000, for those watching, you're referring to $1,000 for 1,000 board feet.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, and prior to COVID, what kind of numbers were we looking at?
Oh, 450 to 600. And when I say that, it didn't stop there. It went to 1900.
Right.
So not only did it get to the highest point ever, it almost doubled that. And so again, when you just talk about a ride, and we use this a lot in our company, even in 2020, when COVID first started, there's no playbook for this. There's no history to this. Nobody's seen it. Nobody's like saying, okay, this is what we're going to do next, because you're just waiting and seeing, and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop every day. And so again, it's just really how, for our company, we're very custom oriented, and our motto a lot of times is we never say no. So for us this year, we spent a lot of time saying, okay, here are your choices. This is what's available. And when they say, well, can I have this? Can I have a dark blue? The answer is no, not at least in 2021. And so, we've never had that. So we had to relearn that, or reteach our guys to say, okay, unfortunately, sometimes we may have to say that's not available. It's not within our grasp, at least this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chad, you just mentioned it, and obviously the world's been dealing with COVID, and we've got a new variant that's making all the headlines now. Do you put that into your planning? And this question for Chad and for Scott. I mean, how are you guys projecting out in 2022 with this giant roller coaster that we are on? Are you taking, the latest headlines into account, or is it more of, hey, we're going to see what comes towards us, whether it's COVID or supply chain, and try to react as best we can?
I think a big part of it is we're fortunate enough, and we are in tune enough with our customers. We know where we're going to be through 2022 easily. And I think Scott is in the same place. So we're a year past that. So as long as we are allowed to function, we're taking the steps that we can, and we've tried to learn along the way. I know from a major engineered lumber supplier that has been on allocation all year this year, that allocation is going to be on all the way through 2022. So that, and Scott spoke to it earlier, the relationships that you have is a big deal. If you are not loyal, if you are somebody that jumped here and there and everywhere, you're probably having a hard time in this market.
Yeah.
Because there, at some point, when you have just enough to sell and the demand is so high, then you have to figure out how you're going to, it's at this point, it's easy to sell. You could sell everything you wanted. I could sell everything I needed to sell in the first month of next year and not hardly do anything, but that's not cultivating business for the future. And so that's a big part of what we see. So that's what we're trying to take into that next year is what could we learn? And, but as far as we're concerned, we're doing very well into 2022, as long as we can still function.
Sure. Scott, how about you and True Homes?
I would echo a lot of what Chad said. I'd answer in a couple ways. What happened with the pandemic and COVID, it really did reframe everyone's view of how business can be done. And whatever traditional ways you had in whatever industry, but certainly in the home building industry, it reframed what we could go and do and how fast we could react, and how we could adjust to the current circumstances. And it was very fluid, as everyone knows. Everything was changing every day on what you could or couldn't do and how close you could be. And Chad mentioned it earlier. We counted as a major blessing. We were considered essential, and we were able to continue business when so many others weren't. But on the backside of that, really, if you go back and think about it, all of us would probably admit that we were like thinking, okay, this thing's going to last for 30 days or 45 days, and then it was, well, it'll last 3 months. The end of the quarter is going to kind of get back to normal. And here we are almost 2 years later, and it's still around.
Right.
But we have changed how we view our business. Therefore, we've changed how we've approached our business as a result of it. And so all the learning that we've, began, we're trying to keep that in mind as we move forward. And, for example, we had, when the pandemic first started, one of our cabinet manufacturer, our only cabinet manufacturer, was in Pennsylvania, and they shut down. And so we had to redirect orders of about close to, I think it was about 400 homes that we had in backlog, and redirect orders down to a production plant in San Antonio in Texas, and have every client reselect. And we did all of that, and we didn't miss one closing. And so our team responded. Well, what we learned out of that was we can be really nimble. And so all that said, I mean, that as we move forward, we just are wrapping up our budget for 2022, and it's set. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got a great opportunity. But we know going into it, we've tried to identify where are our known constraints and be prepared for the unknown constraints. And it's as Chad mentioned, it's everything. And today, I heard something about paper on drywall. I heard that last week. Hey, heads up, there's a shortage of paper for drywall. And then heads up, there's potentially a shortage for flex duct for HVAC. And heads up, there's, lighting's going to be an issue because they're all stuck in containers off the coast of California. And so you do everything you can do within your control, and be prepared to, take a hard left when you need to. And so, and then the last thing I would say is just factoring in some of that into your forecasting, that it's just going to take a little longer. Windows were a big deal this past summer for us, and lead times are getting longer for virtually every product made today, and really, most of that doesn't have anything to do with the product itself, but all the different pieces and parts that go into making that product, and then a lack of people to put it together. So it's here with us for a while, but again, America always catches up when it comes to supply, and we'll figure it out. And the production lines will get back up and running full, And we'll, they managed to stay ahead of it enough that, we're going to build in Charlotte anyway, about 16,000 homes. So there's still product out there to be had. You just want to, as Chad said, something very important. It's about relationships and partnerships. And so you just want to have the best relationships that are long-term. And if you're that guy who's been shopping around and you're not about relationships, you're only about price, then you're struggling right now because you can't find product.
Right. Yeah. Construction has always been a people business, a relationship business, and it's always been about problem solving. So now for the last 2 years, we've just had a new batch of problems that have to be solved. And I think it's going to be a repeat in 2022. Thankfully, demand is there. Which is a good thing, but we just have to solve the next batch of problems coming our way. So shifting gears a little bit, Scott, I'll start with you. How did you find yourself? You've been in for 30 years now in residential construction. Can you give us a quick description of kind of your path to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I had a good friend back. I grew up in Indiana, in a town called Brownsburg. And a good friend of mine's dad was a builder. And when we were 13 years old, we got hired by him to sweep out houses and pick up trash. And so, and that led to getting a job framing. And so my first job was framing houses, and I did that all the way through, high school when I could. And then ultimately went to Purdue in the construction program. And back then they didn't have really any residential track at all. In fact, I didn't even know about the construction program. I started in engineering because when you go to Purdue, back then that's what you did. You're going to be an engineer, right? I was one of the proverbial weeds that got weeded out pretty quickly. So I ended up finding the construction program there, continued to frame houses. And I can remember one time in the summer setting up on the second floor, and it was probably 105 degrees up there and just hot, and I was sweating, and the builder pulled up, and he was in his pickup truck, and the lead guy went down, and they laid out the blueprints on the hood of the truck and stood there, and I was just looking down. I was thinking, I want to be that guy down there who's up in the truck. And so that really was the beginning of a pursuit of getting into the industry. And so took a job right out of school with a local home builder there in Indianapolis and stayed there for 18 years. And came here in Charlotte in 2007 to start kind of the sunset side of my career and start another company. And home building's one of those industries where, I tell people all the time, be careful if you go get into it because you're likely never going to leave. And it's just one of those things. It's got legacy. It's one of the most expensive purchases anyone ever makes in their life. So it's very personal, very relational. And because of that, it's very rewarding. And there's only one time in my career where I ever thought about getting out of the business, and that was to go into an industry that was making buckles and straps, of all things. That's what they made a lot of them. And I got close enough to even consider it, but at the end of the day, I went back and told them, I just can't get passionate about that. But home building is one of those things that it brings out passion in people. And like I said, it's got nobility, and there's a legacy around it that you can look back and say, look at all those homes, and I know all the people that live there, and relationships are developed. So that's how I started my journey anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look at the three of us on this call today. I mean, we're pushing 60 years worth of experience. So, once you're in, there is a love and passion for what we do. Chad, can you talk a little bit about your history?
Sure. Mine is similar start. When I graduated high school, I was in a local school just about 40 minutes north of here called Rensselaer High School. and they had a building trades program there, and was a really great program, hands-on, leave school for half a day. And I was one of those kids that enjoyed it, not just to get out of school, but went through that whole program and was really just going to go into the workforce. And the guidance counselor came to me and said, "Hey, we have a scholarship for you, and where are you going to school?" And I said, "Oh, I really hadn't planned on that." And they said, "Well, we have all this money for you. We need you to go." And so I went to Vincennes University, and did a construction management program and a business management. And then when I was about ready to graduate, my family and myself bought some property in the Jasper County, and we're going to annex this in, and we had all these great plans. And so I rode that through infrastructure and all that for about 2 years, and just wasn't ever coming all the way to get completely through. And so similar story on the other side of the not the heat spectrum, but the cold, coming into October. My wife was at Purdue, or my fiance at that time was at Purdue, and I was like, man, this stinks. Like, I don't want to work through this nasty weather and do all this. And so I made a phone call to one of our managers that has since retired, and just had a great conversation with him. And we ended up, I came to Von Tobel's to be an estimator, and was an estimator for probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And a lot of the customers realized that I had the hands-on experience, and they just, it was different stuff. I don't know if you guys know this, but just because it's on a blueprint doesn't mean it always works. And so I kind of had that hands-on understanding how to fix that or how to work through it. And so it wasn't very long that I had a couple builders that said, "Hey, I want him as my salesman, not as the estimator." But again, I've now 20 some years in, just recently became sales manager for our company. I don't have it on my card. I love to, they won't let me put on my card what I want, but my job title, I consider to be lead firefighter, because it's just day to day, go fix what's wrong. And, we had our yard foreman, his back went out last week, and our receiving guy's back went out yesterday. And so we came in this morning and we were completely tied, and we're like, well, at least we still have the assistant receiving guy. And then he called in sick 10 minutes later. So, it's just one of those things where you roll with the punches and figure it out. But again, I think you're right. Once you get in, it gets in your blood, and you turn around and again, like I said earlier, our company has very seldom said no, almost to the extent of sky hooks. I mean, if it can be done and somebody's willing to pay for it, and most of our customers are in that passion of what they want, we work it out. And so a little crippling what we've gone through, again, going back to having to say no every once in a while, but we try to do it as little as possible.
Absolutely. Well, you guys both touched on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the weather. But let's talk about, I guess, some of the, how those outside the industry view construction, whether it's a misconception or just a wrong premise that they might have. And I guess any recommendations you would have that, we need to, I guess, stem the tide, because we know along with the supply chain issues, we also have a labor issue. And I can remember hearing my dad talk about the labor issue in the 70s. And then I started to see it in the 80s when I was out in the field, and then started running the company and experienced it in the 90s. So this is not a new problem, right? This is an ongoing problem and a generational problem. So anything around the labor issue, misconceptions by the public, whether it's about what we do or about what people in our field do, we'll just kind of open it up to that realm.
Yeah, I can speak into that, Mark. I think you are right. There's a major misconception of the opportunities that exist in residential construction. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't even get the residential part put in there. They just say construction. And so most people, when they hear that term construction, they think of what Chad and I just mentioned, which is weather, it's hot, you're dirty, it's not a high paying job. And that is a major misconception. And the industry has fought it for years and years and years. And you know, it's a passion of mine to change that narrative. As you know, Mark, I've been real involved in trying to educate young adults to see the opportunities and to create pathways so that they might be able to experience it. But the truth is that the residential construction industry is one of the, what I like to say, deepest and widest industries in the world, literally in the world. And it takes hundreds of different companies and people to come together to build one house. And so when I say deep and wide, I mean, it takes a wide array of companies and to bring and make those products. Is deep in its need for people to go and do those jobs. And these jobs, and then the other misconception is that they're not high paying jobs. That is absolutely inaccurate. That these companies are all very professional companies, like Chad's company and Von Tobel, and not just lumber yards, but your mechanical contractors and all the products that go into a home is starving for leadership. And they have, you know, technology that's way beyond what people would think when they hear construction. And so, you know, I've kind of personally made it a mission to go and help change that narrative. We started a program called Builders Bridge. You mentioned it earlier, Mark, and that is just, we started in a nonprofit organization that simply would try and bridge the gap between the opportunities that exist in home building and the needs of the local community, with one of those needs being young adults coming out of high school that aren't going to college, or they might have went to college and are looking to pursue a different industry. Or they didn't go in the service because they couldn't or they didn't want to, but to create pathways to show these opportunities. And, you know, it is a misconception. It's a narrative that unfortunately we've got to fight as an industry to overcome. And like you and I in our last conference we did at the Builders Show, our theme was less talk and more action.
Right.
And, you know, those pathways are available. So people listening on this today and you don't know much about the residential construction industry, I just, you know, encourage you to learn more. Really go out and study it, get with people like Mark or Chad, myself, and you'll be really surprised and shocked at the opportunities that exist. And it's big. It is, and they're great, you know, paying jobs and in their positions of leadership. And we're finding, you know, more and more of the companies that are not just builders. I think that's the other thing. When people hear residential construction, they think they're going to work for a builder. And while, you know, I was standing there saying, I want to be that guy in the pickup truck. Well, there are other people saying, I want to be the guy who has owned the framing company. Right. And I'm the guy that I was working for then, owned a framing company for years and years, made a great career out of it. He just loved doing it. And so there's that pathway and a multitude of others. So it's not just the building of the house itself or the person that is the builder, like the company that I work for. And then there's, not to mention, we talked about land earlier and the land development and infrastructure and inspections. And I mean, it's just, when
Yeah.
you really stare at it and understand it, you start to see, wow, there's some real neat opportunities in this industry.
Yeah, the design side, all your pre-construction side,
Oh.
the supply side, the contracting side from the subcontractors. I mean, it's staggering the amount of opportunity that's there. So I think you're right. We'll come back on Builders Bridge here in just a minute. Chad, what I mean, same kind of question. I mean, whether it was a misconception, you've seen multiple sides of the industry or opportunities. Can you speak to that?
Sure. You know, I think technology, I mean, there's that saying, if you don't stay with it, you're going to get left behind. And we've seen that in just in our takeoffs and things like that. You know, in today's world, you know, when I first started, you would get a blueprint and you would go lay it out, and it's a full size blueprint, and you pine over it and you scale it all and you do everything. In today's world, my estimator would just as soon have a PDF, pulls it into a system, goes around it, and it's laying out other things as it's going. And so it's very technical, and also it's a lot more efficient and it's a lot more accurate than what we ever could have been. And for us, it protects us on a couple of different aspects. But you know, I'm sure this is the same way in a lot of places. But you know, a lot of things go to the job site but don't get used on the project. Maybe the neighborly framing crew borrow those. And so we can say, okay, here's how we did the takeoff. We've traced every line here. We covered every wall. Here's the lineal foot. Here's the waste factor. Here's all things that cover it. And then when you add more technology to it, I have cameras that show that load loaded on the truck. And I have a guy, one of my drivers with an iPad that takes pictures of the seal sealer was there and the joist hangers were there. All those things that are great for everybody because at least somebody knew it was there. But, you know, again, adding technology into our process and all those things we can just see on our phone. You know, you pull it up
Right.
and, you know, say, okay, that was all done. This was done. This was done. This was done. And, you know, so misconception is that you're just a lumberyard and you're just writing tickets. I think that you got to stay with the technology. There are some. We have a big supplier that still handwrites all their acknowledgments to us, and they're doing millions of dollars of business every year, but they're handwriting an acknowledgement. I don't think they can do that much longer because everybody scratches their head when they get it faxed to them. But you know, it's one of those things where misconception of what I think our industry is, you know, you're just a lumberyard, or you're just, you know, again, how we stock lumber and do things, you know, the ways that we can do it today versus what we started. Staying with that, and but again, speaking to jobs, I mean, I would hire almost all the way across any of my positions today. If the right person walked in, I would hire that, no questions asked. So it's something that, and those are not the, you know, there's some jobs that are entry level, but a lot of them are upper level and pay very well.
Yeah, and by right person, Chad, I'm assuming you mean it's not somebody that's got to have 30 years of experience, right? Usually when we're talking about the right person, we're just talking about the attitude that they are willing to learn, a team player, and you know, show up to work to actually do the job that they were hired to do. That, to me, that's the right person, you know, in today's environment.
Absolutely. And I think we've learned that if you find the right person, even if they're, I mean, we've interviewed for positions otherwise in our store, and one of them was a guy that really felt like he didn't want any responsibility and just wanted to work in our yard and take a mental break, and he ended up being one of our better sales guys, just because we eased him back into that process. But it's one of those things where you're absolutely right. We hire a lot of people because of the person, not because of what they know. A lot of that, if they're the right person, have a willingness to learn, then you can teach that. Now, it used to be a lot easier because when I would onboard somebody, I could send them to a window company and they would train them for me. Well, in the past 2 years, that's been more, there's only so much you can do like this. There's some real stuff that you have to do. So that onboarding process has changed.
Sure.
But definitely, you're right. You hire the person.
Yeah. And in the technology side of things, I mean, you just think what we've all seen in our careers. I mean, now we've got drones on job sites. We have GPS systems built into the, excavation equipment. So we know exactly where we are in the ground. GIS systems where we can map properties before we even step out on them. Wearable technology for workers, to check on, heat or cold or the list is unbelievable on the technology side of our industry. Scott, you've mentioned Builders Bridge. You guys have rolled out an internship program. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Builders Bridge was, again, as I mentioned, a vision that we had about 4 years ago, where I felt like there were a lot of great things happening out in the industry, but it was just lacking some synergy, some connection. And so we created Builders Bridge as a means of connecting people together and entities together to create opportunities in the home building business. And so we focused on creating an intern program specifically for young adults, starting with juniors and seniors in high school and people in college and community colleges, and connected them with trade partners that were looking for help. And we have electricians, plumbers, HVAC, roofing companies, framers, interior trim, flooring, landscaping, have all participated in varying degrees. And we're in 3 markets today, in Charlotte, in Raleigh, and in Greensboro, actually 4 in Winston-Salem. And we've connected with local high schools, as I mentioned, and community colleges, and created a framework where they can do a 6 to 8 week program, internship, paid, where the company pays them, company trains them. What we do is help facilitate the connection, and we create the pathway. And we're able to leverage our relationships through True Homes to help. But the Builders Bridge was set up as a nonprofit because it's an industry thing, not a True Homes thing. And we're really just trying, again, to create those pathways. And it's been really neat because we started in 2017 with a whopping goal of putting 5 high school kids to a summer job with a trade. And Whitney Higgins, who's our program and partnership manager, we just hired her, and I gave her that goal of 5 young adults. We used to call them kids. They're not kids, they're young adults. And she then doubled it. We got 12. And so it was fantastic. That was actually 2018. 2019, we did a few more than that. And then we were really on track to do a bunch in 2020. And unfortunately, the COVID hit and shut all the schools down. They went virtual, and we couldn't do the summer internship program. But what we did was a series of videos called Trade Talks, where these trades would basically tell their story about how they got in that industry, what their career path has been. And so those are available. You could watch those on our website on buildersbridge.com. And then last year, as I mentioned, we had 50 in Charlotte and 30 more up in between Greensboro and Raleigh. And what was neat was some of the the people who went through the intern program were being trained by people that started back in 2018 and ended up getting full-time jobs with the company.
Wow.
And it's neat to hear now their testimonies, their pathway. And one in particular was he was a junior in high school, and he did an internship with a company that makes stairs, pre-made stairs. And he went back his senior year, and they offered him a full-time job, and he went straight out of high school with making $40,000 plus. And their hours they work, he was on a really odd work hour schedule from like 1 in the afternoon until 7 at night or something. And he came and gave his story at one of our trade meetings we had not long ago. And it was really neat to hear him talk about, hey, I'm out of high school, I'm getting ready to buy my first house, and I have no debt. And he was just excited. And so those are but one of the stories that we've seen come out of this. Lots of people ended up in full-time jobs, and they're good jobs. They're really good jobs. And it's neat to see that. And the trades, when they see the opportunity, and Chad, you mentioned it earlier, these people are coming in with no experience, none. And they're getting full-time jobs, and it's because of them and their attitude. And so to get one of the internships, you have to fill out your application, and we go through a interview process as part of the program. And but when they come with a willingness and a desire to learn, and a willingness and a desire to work, there's some really neat opportunities. And these companies, there's 4 or 5 here in Charlotte that are Builders Bridge fans and love the program because there's an electrical company here locally that's hired 4. They have 4 people that are, one's a lead now, of their crew lead, and on his way to becoming one of their supervisors. And it's just a great thing for them, because as you mentioned, Mark, this labor issue in our industry has been this difficult for many years, and even before I was in the industry. But it really took a turn, I'd say back in the 80s, early 90s, and when shop classes in high school started to go away, technology became the thing. The smartphones came out, and it used to be when your dad was a plumber, then there was a good chance that you might take over the plumbing business. And when that all went down, Dad, the plumber, said, I want you to be anything but a plumber, and you need to go this other route. And our industry has suffered greatly for that. But what's missed in all of that is that there's a great career path to owning a plumbing company, and you can do really, really well. And this is available. One thing that I'm also passionate about is entrepreneurship, and just the opportunities. The industry's not only lacking on companies that need more people, we need more companies. And so Builders Bridge is working right now on a entrepreneur pathway. True Homes, through our foundation, is committed to putting 2 minority-owned or women-owned businesses in place a year moving forward, minimum of 2. We want to help 2 people start their business. We have an EntrePath, which is another pathway, which is part of our regular stream of business, where we're wanting to help anyone who might want to start their own company, and help them, mentor them to be able to do that. But that pathway is available as well. And so it's an exciting time if someone is willing, like I said, and has the desire and the fortitude to go and do it. It's available. It is available.
And I think we're at crossroads, maybe because of COVID, where people are re-examining either the career they just started or the career they think they thought they were going to start,
Right.
to where we're hearing from more and more young people that say, hey, I want to go out and learn, but I want to get into company ownership, or I want to do something, greater, let's say. And I think that's maybe a silver lining that we might see from one of several silver linings that we might see, that more kids or young people, young adults are turned on to at this point. But we need to show them the opportunity, and things like Builders Bridge certainly are. So I guess we kind of already had segued into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Chad or Scott, I mean, anything you guys want to share about what your respective companies are doing? Anything exciting coming up? Scott, or Builders Bridge going to grow beyond the Carolinas?
Yeah. We have different states that want to start chapters, Indiana being one of them. And we've just been focused really on getting our framework and foundational pathways in place before we expand. But I've had a vision all along, since this was kind of placed on my heart, that we could go do this across the United States. And every major market that had someone that was willing to champion it, a school like Purdue or other high schools that were willing to participate, and trades that had a need. And that's kind of the three pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place. And so, yeah, we see a lot of expansion there. As I mentioned, also our foundation through our company is doing a lot of work in the space of affordable housing, and efforts of working to impact change, structural change, and the opportunity for people to afford homes. Because, as I mentioned, with the undersupply, I mean, prices are going up, and a lot of people are being taken out of the market. And we're fighting to protect price points of affordable housing, and so that comes with a whole other layer of opportunity and working in our local communities, and specifically here in Charlotte, the city of Greensboro, doing some things where we're creating programs, pathways, again, for people who might not otherwise have the opportunity to own a home, to own a home. And again, I get that speaks back again to the kind of nobility of the industry, and just our ability to go and have a meaningful impact on people's lives, and do it in a way that's affirms human dignity and allows them opportunities to experience more life.
Yeah, well, and you said it earlier, less talk, more action. You gotta get the wheel moving, and then hopefully it's rolling all on its own at that point forward. Chad, how about you? Von Tobel, anything you want to share with us that might be coming down the path?
So, I mean, we're kind of in the same as Scott, through our local builders association. Sounds like very similar path. Ours is Greater Lafayette Career Academy, and Mark, you've been involved in some of that, but very, very similar, where we show people, get them some front side understanding of what those jobs are, kind of cut their teeth, if you will, and get them in a place where they can go feel comfortable to enter into some of those jobs. But again, we really we work with a lot of builders, trying to get that misconception out, or get rid of it, that these kids that, there's a lot of kids that don't want to deal with some of the things that you would have to deal with to go to school right now. Certain restrictions or doing things, there's not everybody is as technologically advanced, and they don't want to do some of those things. And so as long as we can do it more hands-on, I think it's definitely helped. So kind of the same thing. We work through our local builders association, and feel pretty strongly about the things that they do to help young people. And we, some of that stuff, we dip down into different levels, and we have a couple different organizations that we work with, to get even down deeper clear down to middle school age, the C2E program that we have, where you're hitting those kids at 6th grade and saying, hey, look, this, to be an electrician, that's a very high paying job, or to be this guy or that guy, and not to talk anybody out of going to college, but it's not for everybody. And so just trying to get those people on the right path early on. And so again, not that we're doing it as a company directly, but we are working together with our local builders association, and something that I know, Mark, you and I have been really deeply involved in for over 20 years. And had some ups and downs of what it is, but we've all enjoyed reviewing code, which is something that you and I touch on all the time. Some code is okay, and some code is very necessary, and but we know that it's a lot of interpretation. And so again, just working directly with our local association to keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, I'm guilty of using the term. Chad, you just used it as well. When we say, this guy or that guy, one of the things I'm excited about is kind of the improvements. While they've been slow, that I feel like we've seen improvements where we're starting to see more females move into our industry. I know our numbers here at Purdue and our construction management department, the numbers have gone up. Involved in our NAHB club, we're over a third of our members are now female. We're starting to see more, whether it's in the field, on the supply chain side, you name it. I think that's a great achievement so far, but we have a long way to go. And I know, Scott's worked on that with the foundation and sponsored scholarships for female students. So I think it's these kind of things, where everybody's trying to come together and actually create actionable items instead of, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had more people in our industry? Well, it's too late for that. It's time to really lay out a path with goals and measured goals and try to move the needle, because there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for young people to find a very fulfilling career. And I'm sure when you're young, probably the most important thing is a lucrative career, right? And that it all meets at construction. And particularly in residential construction, because of the number of different partners we have on a job site.
I couldn't agree more. One of the biggest misconceptions is that there's not a lot of opportunity for women in residential construction. And that just, again, couldn't be further from the truth. As you mentioned, we've committed $100,000 a year through our True Foundation towards women in construction and getting them into the industry that are in the construction industry and want to get into home building. Neat story recently, we've had a lady who started with us and worked in our estimating department for a couple of years, and we realized she really wanted to go expand her knowledge and applied for one of the open jobs in the field as a superintendent. We call them builders. And she got it. She's doing fantastic. She's killing it out there and loving it. And, who knows what other part of the business she'll end up in, but in any of those spaces. And traditionally, the misconception is well, there's, women can't work out in the field. Well, that's not true. As evident by this lady who's out there killing it. And we have a lot of women superintendents. But there's also all those spaces in the office, in sales, in design. I mean, it just, again, it's an area that needs to be acknowledged and we're trying to be intentional about creating those pathways. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I've taken up enough of your valuable time. We really appreciate you carving out part of your day to have a chat with us and share some of your thoughts and experiences. And we look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Glad to be here.